Hey everybody, Tony D. Little Joan is asleep on the floor, and this is a screenwriter's take two, because I got slammed for a copyright thing because I did this review of Dirty Work, and I played a little bit of the trailer silently. So for those of you who keep asking me, why don't you play the trailer? This is why. This is why I have to redo this video, and I'm so annoyed by it. For a movie that's 23 years old, MGM, because the AI thinks I'm playing the movie. I'm not. So here's a bunch of pictures and stills from the movie. So can I do that? Can I show stills from the movie MGM and review it positively? Annoying. Anyhow, I watched Dirty Work after last night. After Louder with Crowder guys were talking about Norm Macdonald and talking about how underrated the movie is. And I remember seeing the trailer back in the day and thinking, I don't know. I can't say I was a giant fan of Norm Macdonald. I liked him. I thought he was okay. I liked Weekend Update. I liked him better when he was off the show, as I did with a lot of SNL guys after the show. After probably the Eddie Murphy years, that's the way the pattern seemed to be. It doesn't seem like anybody on SNL can be funny anymore. They're sort of constrained by the format that's become, you know. But Norm was okay on Weekend Update. I mean, I like Dennis Miller too. He was all right. But ultimately, I liked Norm a lot better after he got off the show. But this came out, I think, after he got on the show. I guess it was one of his SNL contractually obligated movies. And I passed on it because a lot of stuff was coming out at that time that it looked so-so. But I'm actually pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed it a lot. It was pretty funny. Had a lot of good moments. So we're going to talk about it. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Please check out my books. Links in the description. I'll be doing a signing at Bogart's Bookstore in Millville, New Jersey on September 17th. That's tomorrow, Friday, from 4 to 9. I should be reading one of my short stories if there's time, because it's a cafe setting. We'll see if we have enough people to do it. I'll have some of my books there. I don't have Pineys #1 because I sold out at the con and the Amazon shipment hasn't gotten here yet, but I'll have the other books and you can get it online. So come by, get a signed book, chat if you'd like. We'll see you in Millville. Now, Norm Macdonald. So first I'll do the non-spoiler review. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good movie. It's pretty funny, especially in the context now. Back in the 80s and 90s, they would do these movies all the time. Like, there were too many of them, which is part of the reason I missed this one. It just kind of got lost in the shuffle for me as well. But I did like the premise. The premise, of course, being that Artie and Norm are best friends, lifelong best friends, who never really did anything good with their lives, except when they were kids, they had a motto, never take S from anybody. So they turned that later in life into a business because they're desperate for money. Artie's dad is dying, needs a heart transplant. And so they have to raise $50,000 in 2 weeks for the heart transplant, and this is the only thing they can think that they're good at that they can do after trying to do it a bunch of ways. And there's so many people in the movie. Chevy Chase plays a gambling-addicted doctor. You can see him down here, who's great. Don Rickles plays a theater owner, has a great kind of cameo. Chris Farley has a supporting role, and he's actually pretty good. And I always thought Chris Farley was kind of annoying, which may have been one of the reasons I didn't see it, but he was all right in this. He had a weird sort of makeup thing where the premise was he was a guy who got his nose bit off, but it was very like cheap sort of makeup deal. And the funniest thing about this movie, it was directed by Bob Saget, which I may have known before, but I didn't remember, and I just thought, wow, I didn't realize he even directed movies. So, yeah, it's worth seeing, especially in a time like now. There's no comedies. They couldn't even make a comedy like this anymore because it was meant to be outrageous. Now, the downside of it, it was PG-13, and at the time, I vaguely remember PG-13 was a relatively new rating that they were the studios were messing around with. So they decided they could broaden the appeal, I guess, of Norm Macdonald. That to me was a huge mistake. It should have been an R. It should have been a hard R, outrageous sort of Animal House movie. And it looks like it had all the trappings of that. And the guys on Crowder were saying that there's an original draft of the movie online that is more R-rated. So it's a shame they didn't make it the way they should have. With all the comedians in this, John Goodman's in it. Not a comedian, but he's in it. Adam Sandler does a cameo. Oh gosh, so many people. So yeah, it should have been an R-rated movie. Now that all being said, it's still pretty good. I mean, I think the PG-13 rating blunted Artie and Norm's comedy a bit, and the whole movie is just designed to service the comedy. The plot is a bit shoestring. Obviously not very realistic. It also suffers from being a little dated. This is the era really before everybody had cell phones, really. And there's even a scene where they're looking for a job and they've got a newspaper, right? So that's pretty old for some of you out there. But beyond that, it's really funny. Most of the scenes hold up pretty good. Towards the end, it gets a little bogged down in the plot, which they have to resolve. But really, it just ends. It just kind of ends with a voiceover, and that's it. And that's kind of all you need in a comedy movie. It's not so much the resolution of all the various issues. It's more about the comedy. Well, we're out of jokes. Time to wrap this up and say goodnight. And that's basically what they do. And then they show bloopers at the end, which I always like. They didn't show very many of them, but they showed a few. It's on Amazon Prime for $3.99. You can rent it. And I did. And I think it's well worth it. Now, let's get into the spoiler review. We'll do some analysis. So if you're going to go see it, go see it. I recommend it, especially if you need a laugh, especially if you're a fan of Norm Macdonald, the late, now great Norm Macdonald and Artie Lang. Okay, spoiler review. The first act establishes the two best friends, and that's fun because you get to see them as little kids, even though you don't know the characters yet, but you know it's Norm and Artie, so you get these two curly head kids, and they're playing them as in like grammar school and high school or whatever. So they become friends, and they get revenge on everybody who picks on them because they're not very popular. So you sympathize with them almost immediately. Then it cuts to modern day. Norm is a loser, gets thrown out by his girlfriend. He loses his job for reasons that aren't really his fault. Some are, some aren't. And they just spend, and he goes to his friend to crash with him and his dad, played by Jack Warden. And really, they just hang out at a bar all day. So, and then eventually Jack has a heart attack, and they realize they need a heart for him. Jack also reveals that, and this is a weird reveal for a comedy movie, that he's really Norm's father. Like, he never knew his father, and then he reveals, no, I was your father. You never knew him because I had an affair with your mother or whatever. And that joke, when I did the first review, I didn't think it really landed all that well. Now that I look back on it, it was okay, I guess. It still was an odd sort of take, but it did facilitate some other jokes. I think they should have used different ways for him to up that ante. It wasn't quite there. It was a little more too grounded for some reason. There was a lot of stuff in here that was grounded to the detriment of the comedy a little bit. Not much, but a little bit. Anyhow, they got to raise $50,000 in 2 weeks, and Chevy Chase is the gambling-addicted doctor who can perform the surgery, and he'll do it for $50K to save him from the bookies. So the second act is about them coming up with dirty. First, they try to raise the money; it doesn't work. Then they go to dirty work, create dirty work, a revenge for hire thing. And the only thing that was missing from that, they did two jobs that they do, which are pretty funny, and then they go right into the last job, which is the one that ties into the main villain, who's called Travis Cole. I forget the actor's name. He played a lot of heavies in the 80s and 90s, and even now. No, that's not him. That's Norm. Do you have a picture of him? No, they don't. So that was good to see another guy. Do they have it? No, they don't have a picture of him. Artie looks a lot like John Belushi, almost in a lot of the scenes. But anyhow, there's Bob Saget directing. I can't believe he directed the movie. So they eventually do this thing for Travis, and turns out he screwed them, and he's trying to get back at him for something he did, and now they're really under the gun to get the $50,000 because he doesn't give them the money, and then they have to pull their giant elaborate prank, and I think the giant elaborate prank at the end was okay. They get some of the people, their friends with involved, and it's a little strained to try to bring these people back after Norm kind of screwed them over with the building, if you've seen the movie. But, you can forgive it for the fun stuff, which is the end where they ruin the opera. And it's always a typical bad guy thing from the 80s and 90s. He's in the opera, and he's rich, he's an a-hole, and he's stuffy. Which today probably wouldn't fly, simply because it's so old and creaky. You'd have to update that as someone. I mean, the self-righteousness part worked really well. Travis was always, I'm about helping the homeless. Like, that part of it would work great. The opera part, probably not so much. It would probably be better to be like a, one of these progressive Kennedy Center honors thing, I think. But other than that, I think it worked well. And then finally, that's the third act, with the chaos. And then everything's resolved in that last sort of 5 minutes where, like, you get the characters coming together, and then you get that final voiceover was pretty funny. And at 81 minutes, it's a nice tight movie too. You don't feel like they're overstaying their welcome. And I don't want to give away too many of the bits, but they had some great bits. I mean, the guys from Crowder were quoting it. That's more their era. I'm a little before that in terms of quotable movies. But it was very quotable. And I think, that's missing a lot from comedies these days. They're not very quotable. Probably the last quotable comedy was really The Hangover. There was a lot of good quotes from that. And maybe Borat, too. Otherwise, I mean, what's coming out? I mean, those were years ago too. Like, what's coming out? Nothing. So we need more comedies like this, outrageous comedies where who cares about being PC? Norm definitely here did well. It's an underrated movie. You should watch it. So check it out on Amazon Prime. And that's it for me, Tony D. Check us out on Bitchute and Rumble, and we'll see you in the next one.